At the West Point Military Academy, where centuries-old traditions shaped future leaders of the American Armed Forces, the social hierarchy among the cadets was as rigid as the regulations that governed their daily lives. The fall of 2019 brought with it a new class of young aspirants, all wearing impeccable uniforms and carrying dreams of serving their nation. Among them was Marcus Chen, a 17-year-old with broad shoulders and an erect posture, whose brown eyes reflected quiet determination as he carried his military backpack through the institution's stone corridors. Marcus came from San Diego, the son of immigrants who had built a modest life through hard work. His father worked quietly, maintaining a low profile that Marcus had always respected without question. The young cadet had earned his place at the academy through exceptional academic merit and remarkable athletic performance, not through political connections or family influence. His uniforms were second-hand, carefully mended by his mother, and his equipment, while functional, did not display the premium brands that adorned the belongings of some of his more fortunate colleagues. At the opposite end of the social spectrum of the academy was Bradley Ashworth III, heir to a Texas oil dynasty that dated back to the early 20th century. Bradley didn't need to be there. His admission had been secured through generous donations from the Ashworth family, who had funded the construction of a new physical training center years earlier. Tall, blonde, and perpetually tanned, Bradley used his surname as both a shield and a weapon, constantly reminding others of his privileged position in American society. From the first day of basic training, Bradley identified Marcus as a target. Perhaps it was the boy's humble origins, or the way Marcus excelled academically without apparent effort, achieving top marks in military strategy and history, while Bradley struggled to maintain satisfactory averages. During morning physical training sessions, when the cadets ran along the tree-lined trails still covered in dew, Bradley made a point of bumping into Marcus, pushing him out of the way with sarcastic comments about cheap equipment and questionable origins. In the dining hall, where the cadets ate in strict formation, Bradley orchestrated small humiliations. He spilled water near Marcus's seat, spread rumors about the boy's inability to pay for his education, and loudly suggested that perhaps there were special quotas for people like him. Bradley's friends, young men from equally wealthy families, laughed at these provocations, forming a circle of privilege that systematically excluded those considered inferior in the academy's unofficial social hierarchy. Marcus endured everything in silence. He had learned early on that reacting to provocations only fueled the fire of others' cruelty. He focused on his studies, excelling in combat simulations and tactical analysis. His instructors noticed his natural leadership ability, the way other cadets naturally sought his guidance during complex exercises. But this growing admiration only intensified Bradley's resentment, who saw his own status being eclipsed by someone he considered unworthy of recognition. The situation escalated during a field training exercise in November. Temperatures had dropped drastically, and the cadets were taken to the nearby mountains for a 3-day survival simulation. Divided into mixed groups, they were to navigate the hostile terrain using only maps, compasses, and basic equipment. Marcus was assigned to the same group as Bradley, along with 4 other cadets. On the first night, while setting up camp in a clearing surrounded by snow-covered pine trees, Bradley deliberately picked up Marcus's tent and threw it into a partially frozen mud puddle. "Sorry, I didn't see it there," he said with a cruel grin, while his allies laughed. Marcus silently retrieved his tent, cleaned it, as best he could, and pitched it alone, away from the main group. The temperatures overnight dropped below 5 degrees Celsius, and the damp tent offered inadequate protection against the biting cold. On the second day, during an orienteering session through rough terrain, Bradley intentionally provided incorrect coordinates when Marcus consulted the group's map. The goal was to make Marcus appear incompetent to the instructors observing from a distance. But Marcus, who had spent summers exploring the California mountains with his father, quickly identified the error and corrected the course, saving the group hours lost in unfamiliar territory. His intervention was noted by the supervising officers, who recorded his competence in their evaluation reports. Bradley's hostility reached its peak on the 3rd morning. The group had been instructed to build a makeshift bridge over an icy stream using only natural materials found in the forest. Marcus naturally took the lead, directing the construction with precision and efficiency. The bridge was nearly complete when Bradley, feigning a loss of balance, violently shoved Marcus, causing him to fall into the icy stream. The water was so cold that Marcus felt his lungs contract immediately. He emerged quickly, soaked and shivering, while Bradley offered a transparent excuse about having slipped. The other cadets remained awkwardly silent, none daring to confront the son of one of Texas's most powerful families. Marcus walked out of the creek alone, his clothes freezing rapidly in the cold mountain air. It was this incident that finally caught the officials' attention. One of the instructors, Captain Reynolds, a 20-year veteran with eyes that missed no detail, had observed the entire interaction from his lookout post. He immediately descended to the group, ordering Marcus to be taken back to base camp for treatment of potential hypothermia. Bradley received a stern warning, but his family connection protected him from more serious consequences. That night, while Marcus recovered in the academy's infirmary, wrapped in thermal blankets and drinking hot chocolate, Captain Reynolds made a decision. There was something about the quiet, dignified demeanor of that young cadet that deserved protection. Reynolds decided to discreetly investigate the situation between Marcus and Bradley, talking to other instructors and observing the dynamics between the cadets more closely. What Reynolds discovered disturbed him. Bradley wasn't just an isolated bully. He had created a culture of exclusion and cruelty among a select group of privileged cadets, using his family influence as a shield against accountability. Other young men from modest backgrounds had also been targeted, though none as persistently as Marcus. The captain knew he needed to act, but he also understood the political complexities involved in confronting a member of the Ashworth family. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his routine with unwavering determination. Bradley's taunts intensified after his return from camp. During morning formations, Bradley would quietly comment on Marcus's poverty, on how he clearly didn't belong in such a prestigious institution. In the library, where the cadets studied under the soft light of old lamps, Bradley and his friends would laugh loudly near Marcus's desk, deliberately disrupting his concentration. But something was changing. Other cadets were beginning to see the injustice of the situation. James Rodriguez, a Puerto Rican cadet from the Bronx, began sitting with Marcus during meals, offering silent solidarity. Sarah Mitchell, whose family had a long military tradition but limited financial resources, also approached him, forming a tacit alliance against Bradley's behavior. In December, the Academy held its traditional winter ball, a formal event where cadets could bring guests and briefly relax from the rigorous demands of military training. Bradley showed up in a custom-made tuxedo, driving an imported sports car, accompanied by a model from Los Angeles. He made a point of flaunting his wealth throughout the evening, buying expensive drinks for his friends, and distributing illegal Cuban cigars in the Academy's gardens. Marcus attended the ball in a rented suit and without a date, but his presence was dignified and confident. He danced with Sarah Mitchell, and the two talked about their future plans in the armed forces, about the meaning of service and sacrifice. Bradley watched from his privileged corner with growing disdain, unable to comprehend how someone so seemingly inferior could maintain such composure and earn genuine respect from colleagues. Tensions finally exploded in January during a military ethics class taught by Colonel David Harrison, a decorated officer who had served in 3 different war zones. The day's discussion focused on leadership under pressure and the importance of treating all soldiers with dignity, regardless of their background. Bradley, feeling invulnerable, made a sarcastic comment about how some people simply didn't have the pedigree necessary to lead men in real combat. Marcus, who rarely spoke in class unless asked, raised his hand. His voice was calm but firm, as he asked Bradley if he believed courage and competence were determined by bank accounts or individual character. The room fell into absolute silence. Bradley, accustomed to never being directly challenged, flushed with anger, rising from his chair and advancing toward Marcus with clenched fists. Colonel Harrison intervened immediately, his voice echoing through the room with undeniable authority. He ordered Bradley to sit down, warning that physical violence would result in immediate expulsion, regardless of family connections. But the damage was done. Bradley had publicly revealed his true nature before a respected superior officer, and his mask of civilized superiority had completely fallen. After class, Colonel Harrison asked Marcus to stay. The young cadet expected a reprimand for provoking the confrontation, but instead, the colonel offered words of encouragement. He explained that he had served with Marcus's father years ago, recognizing the Chen surname immediately. There was a reason for the family's silence about Marcus's father's military past, and that reason was about to become very relevant. Marcus's father, the colonel revealed, was no ordinary worker. He was General Thomas Chen, who had served as a special operations commander on some of the most highly classified missions in American military history. His identity had been kept strictly secret for national security reasons. Even after his retirement, the general had chosen a quiet civilian life in San Diego, working discreetly in a naval logistics office to protect his family from potential threats from enemies he had made during decades of clandestine service. Marcus had always known his father had a military background, but he never understood the true extent of his career. General Chen had insisted that his son earn his position at the academy through merit, without using connections or revealing his family history. It was a matter of principle, a lesson in humility and self-reliance that the general considered essential for his son's development as an officer and a man. Colonel Harrison explained that the time had come to act. Bradley Ashworth had crossed lines that could not be ignored, and his behavior was creating a toxic environment that contradicted the Academy's core values. Harrison had contacted General Chen, informing him of the situation. The general was on his way to the Academy for a visit that would completely change the power dynamics among the cadets. The following morning, a cold Friday in January, the cadets were summoned to a special assembly in the Academy's main auditorium. Rumors swirled in the hallways. Some said an important officer would be visiting. Others speculated about changes in Academy policies. Bradley Ashworth sat in his usual seat at the front, surrounded by his privileged friends, completely oblivious to what was to come. The stage was empty when the cadets gathered, but then the side doors opened and a figure entered with measured, precise steps. The man wore a full military uniform, with rows of medals covering his chest, including several bronze stars and a Medal of Honor. His gray hair was cut in an impeccable military style, and his eyes scanned the room with the authority of someone who had commanded men in life-or-death situations. General Thomas Chen didn't need to introduce himself. His presence was enough. But when the Academy director took the stage and announced the general's name and accomplishments, a collective whisper swept through the auditorium. The cadets studying military history recognized the name immediately. Chen had planned some of the most audacious operations of the last few decades, saving hundreds of lives through brilliant strategy and exemplary leadership. Marcus, seated at the back of the auditorium, watched his father with a mixture of pride and growing understanding. He now understood the silences, the interrupted conversations, the moments when his father seemed distant, lost in memories he couldn't share. Bradley Ashworth stood at the front, his expression shifting from curiosity to confusion as the general began to speak about military values, about the importance of judging soldiers by their character and not by their socio-economic background. General Chen recounted stories from his career, describing situations where soldiers from humble backgrounds had demonstrated extraordinary courage, while those from privileged families had failed under pressure. He spoke of the importance of humility, mutual respect, and the understanding that in real combat, the only things that mattered were competence, courage, and loyalty to comrades. The words were addressed to all cadets, but there was an underlying intention that some were beginning to perceive. Then, the general did something unexpected. He asked Cadet Marcus Chen to stand and introduce himself. Marcus obeyed, rising slowly as hundreds of eyes turned in his direction. The auditorium fell absolutely silent. General Chen looked directly at his son and said clearly, for all to hear, that Marcus was his greatest achievement, not for the medals he might one day win, but for the character he had already demonstrated in facing adversity with dignity and perseverance. The revelation hit the auditorium like a shockwave. Bradley Ashworth felt his stomach churn as comprehension and horror spread across his face. The cadet he had tormented for months, the young man he considered inferior and unworthy, was the son of a living military legend, the general who had commanded operations where billions of dollars and thousands of lives were at stake, a man whose real influence in the armed forces made the Ashworth family's donations insignificant in comparison. After the assembly, General Chen requested private meetings with several cadets and officers. Bradley Ashworth was summoned to the warden's office, where the general waited alongside Colonel Harrison and Captain Reynolds. What transpired in that room remained officially private, but Bradley emerged an hour later visibly shaken, his face pale, and his eyes avoiding eye contact with anyone in the hallways. In the following days, subtle but significant changes swept through the academy. Bradley became noticeably quiet. His provocations ceased entirely. His friends, perceiving the shift in power dynamics, gradually distanced themselves, seeking more productive associations. Marcus's group grew, other cadets approaching with genuine respect, not because of his father, but because of the example of integrity he had maintained even under intense pressure. General Chen stayed at the academy for 3 days, during which he had long conversations with Marcus about responsibility, leadership, and the weight of carrying a family legacy. He explained his reasons for keeping his identity secret, emphasizing that he wanted Marcus to develop his own strength, not relying on inherited connections or reputation. Now that the truth was revealed, Marcus carried not only his own future, but also the expectations that came with being General Chen's son. Marcus understood that his father had given him a precious gift by allowing him to face challenges alone. The adversity he had endured, the humiliations he had tolerated with dignity, had forged his character in ways that privilege and protection never could. He had earned the respect of his peers through actions, not through family name. This was a solid foundation upon which to build an honorable military career. Bradley Ashworth never fully recovered from the blow to his ego. He completed his first year at the academy, but his mediocre grades and the loss of his social status led him to reconsider his military future. At the end of the academic year, Bradley transferred to a traditional university where he could use his family influence without the rigorous scrutiny that the military academy demanded. His departure went largely unnoticed, a stark contrast to his boisterous and arrogant arrival months earlier. Marcus Chen continued his journey at West Point, excelling academically and developing leadership skills that impressed veteran instructors. He carried the Chen name with pride now, but also with an understanding that names open doors, but it is individual actions that determine whether someone stays in or is driven out. His father's legacy was an inspiration, not a crutch, and Marcus was determined to forge his own path of honor and service. Years later, when Marcus would receive his own commission as a second lieutenant, General Chen would be present at the ceremony, watching with silent pride as his son took his first steps in a military career that, he hoped, would be guided by principles of integrity, humility, and respect for all those who choose to serve, regardless of where they began their journeys. The following months at the academy brought profound transformations, not only for Marcus, but for the entire institutional culture that had allowed behaviors like Bradley's to thrive without adequate challenge. Captain Reynolds, inspired by General Chen's intervention, initiated a series of seminars on inclusive leadership and mutual respect, using real-life examples from military units where cohesion had saved lives in combat. The cadets began to understand that prejudices based on social class had no place in an army that depended on absolute trust among soldiers. Marcus found himself in a peculiar position after the revelation about his father. Some cadets sought him out hoping for favors or connections, but he quickly established clear boundaries. His friendship with James Rodriguez and Sarah Mitchell deepened, the three forming a core group of cadets who valued merit over privilege. During training exercises, Marcus deliberately chose partners from diverse backgrounds, demonstrating through his actions that competence knew no socioeconomic boundaries. In the spring, Marcus led his platoon in an inter-academy military tactics competition, defeating teams from rival institutions through meticulous planning and coordinated execution. His victory was celebrated not as an individual triumph, but as validation of the philosophy his father had tried to instill. Excellence emerges from character, discipline, and collaborative work, not from bank accounts or prestigious surnames. General Chen visited occasionally, always discreetly, observing his son's progress from a distance. He noted with satisfaction that Marcus maintained the humility that had characterized his first months at the academy, even now that his family legacy was known. The young cadet continued to use basic equipment, refused special treatment, and devoted extra time to helping classmates with academic difficulties, perpetuating a cycle of generosity that contrasted sharply with the culture of exclusion that Bradley had tried to establish. During summer vacation, Marcus completed an internship at a military base in Texas, ironically not far from the Ashworth family estate. There, he worked alongside soldiers from all backgrounds, learning that the Academy's lessons on diversity and merit reflected the operational realities of the modern armed forces. He returned for his sophomore year with a matured perspective and a renewed commitment to the ideals of service that his father embodied. News about Bradley occasionally surfaced through shared connections. He had settled comfortably into his chosen university, surrounded once again by people who valued his surname more than his character. But those who knew him at West Point noticed a subtle shift in his social media presence. The excessively ostentatious posts had diminished, replaced by more moderate content. Perhaps the experience had planted seeds of self-awareness, even if Bradley never publicly admitted the lessons learned through humiliation. In the fall of his sophomore year, Marcus was selected as platoon leader, a position of responsibility usually reserved for older cadets. His appointment was met with enthusiastic approval from colleagues who had witnessed his evolution from a silent target of bullying to a respected leader. During his tenure, he implemented mentorship, programs where veteran cadets mentored newcomers, ensuring that no one faced the adjustment challenges alone, challenges he had navigated with such difficulty. Colonel Harrison, promoted to battalion commander, frequently cited Marcus as an example of authentic leadership during lectures to incoming cadets. He contrasted Marcus's trajectory with anonymous stories of cadets who had failed because they confused privilege with competence, financial resources with leadership ability. The lessons were clear without mentioning names, but those who were present during the conflict with Bradley perfectly understood the references. Sarah Mitchell, who had become one of Marcus's closest friends, was accepted into an elite military aviation program, becoming one of the few women in her specialization. James Rodriguez excelled in military engineering, developing prototypes of equipment that would later be adopted in real operations. The trio represented the promise of academia when it functioned properly, cultivating talent regardless of background, focusing exclusively on potential and dedication. At the graduation ceremony 3 years later, Marcus received several academic honors and a commission as a second lieutenant in intelligence operations, a field that combined his analytical skills with tactical training. General Chen was present naturally, but remained discreet among other family members, allowing his son to enjoy the moment achieved through his own effort. When father and son finally embraced after the ceremony, no words were necessary. The general's look of pride communicated everything that needed to be said. Years of service lay ahead for Marcus, filled with challenges that would test everything he had learned at the academy. But the lessons of that first year, when he faced cruelty with dignity and responded to humiliation with quiet perseverance, would remain foundational in his approach to leadership. He would never forget how it felt to be judged by his origins rather than his abilities, and that memory would inform every decision about how to treat soldiers under his command. Bradley Ashworth eventually took on executive positions in the family businesses, living comfortably within the bubble of privilege he had always known. But in moments of private reflection, he occasionally thought about that year at West Point, about the quiet cadet he had completely underestimated. These memories carried a discomfort that money couldn't alleviate, reminders that true character is revealed under pressure, and that underestimating adversaries based on superficial appearances is a fundamental error that even the privileged make at their own peril. Their story had no dramatic reconciliation or Hollywood redemption. They simply went their separate ways, each carrying different lessons from that year when social hierarchies collided with military realities, and where, in the end, merit prevailed over privilege in the most unexpected way possible.